guys, I'm Lucy and I'm going to be talking through my experience first time screen printing. So I started a screen printing class at SVA because I miss college, I miss learning, and I miss being a student. And more than that, I also miss just practicing art in my day-to-day routine. Screen printing is generally used for posters, artwork. It can use on a variety of fabrics, materials. The process of screen printing is basically you have your design, you then put this chemical called emulsion on the screen. And emulsion is a substance that will harden whenever it's exposed to light. So you'll take your screen with emulsion on it, you'll put it on this very big light machine that will expose your emulsion screen to light. Now, with your design behind the screen, the light from the machine will hit every part of the screen, and where it is black, where your design is, light cannot pass through, so the emulsion will not harden. So basically everywhere else that is white or design on it, the emulsion will harden and it will create the stencil. So you'll wash this emulsion off, and now you're left with a stencil of your design. And now you can just print that freely with any color paint you want, and you just run paint through the screen with a squeegee, and you can print that on anything as many times as you like. I thought it'd be fun to know a little bit about the history of screen printing. Screen printing actually originated in China in the Song Dynasty. It was used to transfer designs onto fabric. Screens in the beginning were made out of human hair, woven really tightly, and they used a thick brush to force ink through. And over time, it transformed into stretching silk over frames, so that's why it's called silk screen printing. And during the 19th century, when silk was traded from Asia, screen printing became very popular in Europe, and it grew. Slowly, it turned into an industrialization of how to print ad campaigns, and then artists used it to reproduce work onto different materials. So in the 1960s, pop artists like Peter Blake, Andy Warhol used screen printing, and they called it serigraphy, which was like them saying that it was an artistic application rather than how it was used like commercially and industrially. And then the popularity of screen printing grew among contemporary artists. Let's get into my experience of screen printing and what I learned along the way. So I would say the first lesson that I learned was that screen printing really starts whenever your pen meets paper. From your initial design, it really matters. My initial design was this drawing I drew, and I thought all you really needed was to have layers separated by colors. But it's also about taking into account like the opacity of how things will overlay, as well as making sure there's sort of a margin of error between every layer, so that whenever I went to go print my second layer, if it was a little bit off or misaligned, that it would still look okay and there wouldn't be a bleeding between the two layers. When you're printing multiple layers or multiple colors, it's really hard to actually align your design exactly. The next lesson I learned was if you're just trying to get the job done, then just don't do it at all. This quote actually, I had watched How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. That movie is great. I would recommend everyone to go watch it. It will make you miss your grandma a lot. In that movie, the grandma basically tells the grandson, who is kind of cutting corners, doing everything, like instead of boiling water, he'll microwave water, which I do that a lot. So she told him, if you're just trying to get the job done, then I'd rather you not help me at all. My parents used to tell me that all the time when I was a kid. That really stuck with me whenever I was screen printing, because every step really matters in screen printing. So if you mess up on the first step, like the design, then you'll have to go back and remaking your design. If you mess up the emulsion, then it might peel or stick or not wash away clearly. So whenever I was first applying emulsion onto my screen, I had done it in a really bad way to where the emulsion was gooey, thick, and dripping everywhere. I just went ahead and let it dry to print my stencil on. Whenever I had to expose it to light, my emulsion was really sticky and it dried really unevenly. Some parts of the screen was actually more opaque than others parts, so that made printing on the screen really inconsistent. Hard to wash off my design, so some of my design didn't peel correctly. So there's a lot of waiting in between every step of the process. So whenever you put emulsion on, you have to wait like 15 minutes for it to dry. And then whenever you wash off the emulsion to reveal your design, you have to wait like a good 20 minutes for that to dry. And I got really impatient waiting for the to dry after washing, so I thought I could like hack the system and kind of just, you know, wipe it off with newsprint and then dry it with like a hair dryer. And usually that works if your screen is like really close to drying, but mine was not dry and I just rushed to go print this, and because of this it was still wet in some places, and that affected how the design was printed onto the screen. I had to then scrap those papers and then re-dry it. From the beginning, from your design up until how you mix your paint, every step matters. So my last layer just had mixed black paint and I put that on. And what I found was that like after you put the first layer on, the paint was really dry. So it dried really quickly into my screen, which then when I went to go put on my subsequent layers, it wouldn't print the whole design because the initial paint had dried in some places. I've added water to loosen it up a bit, as well as some retarder component that will make the paint dry a lot slower, so you have more time in between each paint squeegee to just like do the next one. So my final prints for my first time printing didn't come out ideally how I wanted. The next lesson I learned is that setup is everything. Mise en place, as the French say. I might have butchered that, but yeah. So just making sure that everything is in place. Setup is really important when you're printing your design, to make sure that the frame distance is equal across, because the bounciness of the frame from the table is really important, because the pressure that you apply when you squeegee it on should be consistent. So mine was coming on an angle at first. The paint will not print as evenly at the top as it will on the bottom. The way that I solved for this was I used like a big piece of cardboard that would lower the distance gap between screen printing as well as like the table. I also didn't know that like your height to the table matters a lot too. So because I'm short and the table is kind of tall, I was really struggling in the beginning printing my design. Like my whole body would wiggle back and I would have to move with it. It just like, it was not right. Yeah, so I eventually used the stool and it was a lot easier. The most important part is making sure that you're aligning your papers properly, because you want your prints to be very consistent, especially if you're doing multiple colors. So basically when you put your paper down and do the first layer of the screen, you want to pay attention to if you're aligning it to the left corner or the right corner. You want to just make sure that your paper is going into the same place, and how you do that is you can use little pins to mark where your paper is supposed to slide into, or you know, you can use tape, you can use really anything that works just to let you know where your paper is supposed to like slide into. And then the last lesson I learned, which I think might be the hardest lesson, is that mistakes are part of the process. I'm sure like a lot of us are like this, but it's hard for me to make mistakes. Whenever I make mistakes in something I'm trying to be really good at, it's like, oh, it's the end of the world. I'm like always so stressed, like what am I gonna do now? And I think that this process has helped me really becoming more accepting of mistakes and trying to embrace mistakes, that it is part of the process. Prints and mistakes are the only way to really learn and have lessons that stick with you, so that whenever I print next time, I won't make the same mistakes, and hopefully I will only get better. I also learned to not be scared to ask for help. Sometimes I would ask for help whenever I made the mistake twice. Always ask for help. People are willing to help out and they're always happy to teach you what they learned. And also, it's okay to start over. Whenever I printed my last layer and it wasn't satisfactory, I wanted to rip my hair out, but that's besides the point. Like, I think accepting that sometimes you have to start over, even if it's like a really large project, that is just part of the process as well. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often, but if it does happen, it's not the end of the world, and that's something I had to remind myself. And that we all have to remember that this is a human handmade process and we're not printers. So I really enjoy screen printing so far. It's only been like 1.5 weeks, and I hope that at the end of this 10-week course, I will have not mastered, but gotten a lot better at screen printing, and I can look back on this experience and maybe laugh a little. And yeah, thanks guys for watching.